Good morning. Welcome to worship with the community of the First Unitarian Church of Omaha. I'm the Reverend Shari Woodbury, the church's settled minister. Whether you're attending online or in person, I am so glad that you have chosen to join us on this lovely August morning. Worship, which from the Latin means to remember that which is of worth. That's why we come back here, to call us back to our highest values in community. A special welcome to those who may be visiting. This congregation is a community of all ages and abilities. It is a community of diverse cultural and class backgrounds, and it is a community of a rainbow of gender and sexual identities. We draw from many sources of inspiration and share common liberal religious values. Whoever you may be, we welcome you to bring your whole self into this community. If you are joining us online, I encourage you to create a YouTube account if you haven't already, and sign into it when you attend online. This will give you access to the comment feature in YouTube. You can use that to share joys and concerns that will be lifted up during the service, to say hello to other online attendees, or to share something about how it connects with you, and we do look at the comments. Those here in the sanctuary are invited to go down to the common room downstairs in the basement after the service for coffee or tea. You can sip and visit there, or take a to-go cup and go out into the church garden for fellowship in the fresh air. However you are attending, I encourage you to check out upcoming events around the church. Online, you can go to firstuuomaha.org events, and first is all spelled out, for an up-to-date list. And here in the sanctuary, whether or not you have any other need for it, you can grab one of these yellow communication cards, which are at both doors. There are large and small versions, and one side has one of these QR codes, which if you have one of those apps on your smartphone, you can scan the QR code and instantly it brings up all the things that are coming up at the church. These are also for sharing joys and concerns, if you have one here in the sanctuary, and for telling us about you if you're a visitor. A few highlights of what's coming up. We have more things going on now as we're gearing up for fall. Book Club, this is the one that does mostly nonfiction, is restarting monthly meetings this Monday on Zoom. There's no shared reading this time. They're just going to be discussing what you read this summer. Community night for all ages will be held here at the church next Friday. Food and fun for all who want to join in. And choir rehearsals resume on Wednesday nights starting September 7th. All voice parts are welcome. No experience is needed. You can just come and make a joyful noise and feed your spirit with music. Each week we acknowledge that where we meet for worship as the First Unitarian Church of Omaha is the land of the Omaha Oto Nations, and that Indigenous people in the greater community have been marginalized and made invisible. We recognize their presence among us and aspire to work with them to resolve issues of poverty, displaced children, and murdered and missing Indigenous women, the MMIW. I invite Carol Ramsey up to light our flaming chalice this morning, the symbol of our faith. And as she does that, you may all join me in the chalice lighting words by echoing each line after me. Are you ready? Spark of the Spirit, cupped in earth's embrace. Light of love, alive in all creation. As we kindle this flame, we rekindle our connection to the sacred web of life. Thank you, Carol. You have arrived at a liberal religious community, whether out of need or habit or happenstance. You have landed in a tradition that long has celebrated agency and conscience, that long has championed reproductive justice. In this time of gutting setback, may we who gather here find what we need: acceptance of the many paths we have taken, including our own, solidarity with all marginalized people, a vision of a world free of coercion, full of freedom and love, courage to work for deeper justice, joy in moments of progress and pleasure, patience and stamina to keep going. Come, let us worship together. Our opening hymn is number 128, For All That Is Our Life. And I have something new to share with you this morning. Per our COVID task force, which met recently, we are resuming unlimited congregational singing with a twist to help protect the vulnerable among us, of which we have more than your average group of humans. If you want to sing here in the sanctuary, please wear a good mask, and we do have extras at both doors. You can also raise your hand now if you'd like an usher to bring you one so you can participate in the singing. What's that? There's cool new black ones, which actually are very comfortable to sing in. Those who prefer not to mask can simply listen and sway and do whatever feels good to your body, and you may rise if you'd like to do that, either here or at home. For All That Is Our Life, number 128. We come to the time for a story for all ages. Children in the sanctuary are invited to come forward to hear this story, which will be shared by Christina Strong, our Director of Lifespan Religious Education. She has a story to share with you about our amazing bodies and the choices we make about them.
Good morning. I also have Pele Strong here helping me out with the story today. I'm a little bit more nearsighted than you. All right, our story today is called Everybody, Everybody, and it's written by Emma Linda McLean and illustrated by Audrey Herbertson. And this is a slightly abridged version of the story.
Hey everybody, raise your hand if you have a body.
That's everybody. We all have bodies. In some ways, our bodies are the same, and in some ways, we are all different.
What does it mean to live in a body? It's pretty amazing, and also pretty complicated. Every one of us begins life in a baby-sized body.
Then our body changes and grows. Sometimes we grow very slowly, and sometimes changes happen faster. But eventually, we all grow into adult bodies. Growth and change can sometimes be hard for us, but everybody goes through it. Nobody has another choice. It's the way life has always worked.
Everybody alive has to live in a body, and it's not a perfect system. Bodies can get hurt sometimes. They hurt a lot.
Bodies can get sick, sometimes really sick.
And bodies have lifetimes from birth to death.
Sometimes a person hurts another person's body by accident. A person might bump into someone. Ouch!
And then they say, "I'm so sorry. Are you okay? Can I help you?"
Sometimes, I'm sad to say, there are people who will hurt another person's body on purpose. I think we can agree that it's one of the worst things a person can do, hurt someone else on purpose.
We all know what hurt feels like, and causing another person that pain is wrong.
So there it is. Because we have bodies, sometimes our bodies feel hurt or pain or hunger or cold.
But here's the deal. There is a trade-off. Our bodies can give us wonderful feelings too. Yes, everybody hurts sometimes, but your body can feel amazing sometimes. It's the gift your body gives to you.
That feeling of a big hug from someone you love, especially when you've missed them.
The feeling of wiggling your toes in sand or grass, or splashing in puddles.
The feeling of dancing to your favorite song, or spinning in circles, or running fast.
Or the feeling of the soft fur of an animal who loves you and wants you to pet them. All of those awesome feelings and millions more belong to you. They're yours and nobody else's. And you have your whole life to enjoy them.
As a human being in your very own body, you have the right to say what happens to it. Here's a good example. Do you like being tickled? Sometimes. It's okay if you don't. And even if you do, it's okay to be in the mood for it sometimes and not other times. Lots of people have fun playing tickle games, though. It can feel good to laugh so hard and so loud you have to catch your breath.
But if you want your tickler to stop, you can say stop. Everybody deserves to be listened to when they say stop. It's only okay for someone to touch your body when you say it's okay. The special kind of permission is called consent. When we ask someone if we can give them a hug and they say yes, they're giving consent. Keeping our bodies to ourselves unless someone consents to being touched is part of respecting each other.
What if somebody says no? Simple. They didn't consent, so we don't hug them.
Some people might think that kids and adults have different rules about touching, but it doesn't matter how old a person is. Everyone deserves respect, and everybody gets to decide how and when they want to be touched.
We have our whole lives to live in these bodies, to learn how to take care of them, to feel good in them.
To use our bodies to do good in the world.
So that's our wish for you, and for everybody. Consent, respect, and the joy that belongs to everybody. And if you would like more of this content for the children in your life, you can go to morethansex-ed.com, and the author of this book is the director of that program. Thank you.
And now a social action moment. Suzanne King will share insight from a group many of us might not have thought about when considering reproductive justice. Let's listen. Here she comes.
Good morning. I want to ask you to pause for a moment. This is a group people never talk about. It's women who are involved in the incarceration system. This could be women who are currently incarcerated. They could be in state, federal, or county jails. They could be in prison. They could be waiting trial and not able to make bond or not granted bond. And it could be women who are on parole and probation who are under state control as to where they move. In America, we have 30% of the incarcerated women of the whole world. So we have a lot of women incarcerated. It's about 1 million women in total. It sounded so good when I said this at home. It's harder up here. And if you are involved in the incarceration system, you have very little choice over your medical care. What you get is whatever's provided. Women that are on parole and probation, most of them are wearing GPS monitors that monitor where they go 24/7. So one area I'd like you to think about is, what if you were arrested for a crime, you have not been convicted, you haven't gone to trial, but you can't post bail, and you are incarcerated and you find out you're pregnant. You have no access to any type of abortion or way to end the pregnancy unless your incarcerators agree to it. And in many states, that's not granted. In Nebraska, there is no formal policy from corrections as to what happens if a woman wants an abortion. So it's up to whomever is your, if you're on parole, it's up to your parole officer to decide if you can or can't. And if you're in a state where it is now illegal to have an abortion, you have to get permission from your parole officer to leave the state. And you can't leave the state unless you tell them why. And so if this person has, I want to say this, pro-life, does not agree with abortion, you're stuck. You can't leave the state. You can't even leave the city without permission. So what I'd like you to consider is that as the abortion laws change in our country, this is a population that is never discussed, and their choice for reproductive freedom and reproductive justice is greatly diminished. It's also a group that in our society is greatly discarded. I mean, fallen women, they've been in prison. I mean, God, horrible. How could you be a good mother if you served time? And so I hadn't really thought about this myself, even though I've been working in the incarceration system for 20 years. I never thought about what it'd be like if you were in prison, or, I mean, there are crimes that happen in prison where women end up pregnant. Corrections never talks about that. But if you are incarcerated and you are pregnant, you get whatever care is there, and they don't have prenatal care. They don't have the facilities. And I was talking to a woman who was previously incarcerated, and she said that as soon as your baby is born, it is considered a ward of the state, and it is taken from the woman. She doesn't have a choice to raise it, but she also doesn't have a choice to end her pregnancy. So I'm just offering this as a topic for consideration. There are some resources, but this is not a topic that you're going to find covered in the news very much. It's just not discussed. Thank you, Shari.
Thank you, Suzanne. Every week we take an offering in support of our liberal religious values. Half of the loose currency in the offering plate here in the sanctuary is donated to a cause with a local presence, which advances important principles of this faith. Those on YouTube may choose to donate directly to the organization online. Our Share the Plate recipient for August is the Whitney Young Academy, which empowers youth through education and career preparation, through academic, personal, and social development, assisting with goal setting and grooming future leaders. It's a program of the Urban League of Nebraska, actually named for a former member of this congregation, and you can learn more at Urban League's website, urbanleague.neb.org. Search for Whitney Young Academy to donate. I invite you to give with a generous heart as we hear a gift of music. This is Mozart's Vedrai Carino, sung by special guest Rocio Ville.
This piece, it's sung by this character called Serlina, and she's very smart. So she's trying to, her lover had like an accident or something in this play, and then she's trying to use her power to make him feel like better, and sometimes somehow get him to do something. So I like it because her choice doing this. So.
Come to the time for the sharing of joys and concerns. When we share our joys with one another, our joy is multiplied. And when we share our concerns, we give people who care about us a chance to reach out and offer their support. If you're watching online, you can go ahead and put a joy or concern in the comment, and I will lift it up. If you do so later, I or our pastoral care team may reach out. Here's a couple I have from the sanctuary. Terry Lynn Brewer says, thanks for all the assistance during my recovery. And it's good to see Terry Lynn, I can't eyeball her right now, but back in the sanctuary, right there, today, a little further up than she often is. And also a concern, thoughts and prayers go out to the Godfreys as they say goodbye to a furry member of their family. So we're sorry for their loss. I don't know about the rest of you, but I've been concerned. It's wonderful that we've had rain here recently, but reading about places like Dallas, Fort Worth that had drought and then floods that their land was not prepared for, and our friends in Kentucky who are still recovering from flooding, more and more of these extreme weather events happening with climate change. Okay. As we hold in the heart of this community all of those who know joys and sorrows, whether or not they've been shared, I invite you to join me in singing a centering song, number 123, Spirit of Life. Again, for safety, currently singing or humming in the sanctuary is for those who are wearing a good mask. Spirit of Life. close of this music, let us continue in a mood of meditation or prayer. After a pastoral introduction, we'll observe a period of silence, which I will end with the ringing of the bell. During the quiet, you may wish to meditate or pray on your own. And right now, you might want to check your posture, rest your eyes, get comfortable. Spirit of life, come unto us. In this post-Roe era, stir our hearts with compassion for all of those whose lives will be made that much harder in our nation as access to reproductive care, including abortion, becomes even more uneven and inequitable. Roots, hold us close as we gather up our strength. Bring us home to our interconnectedness with all people, that we may find in this unity not only deep sorrow for those whose options will decrease and whose suffering may increase, which persons may include our very selves, but that we may also be energized by the love and care that wells up within us for our sisters and siblings in the human family. Wings of love, set us in motion. O Goddess, even as we feel you cradle and comfort us with tenderest care, may we feel also your creative power surge in us. Let us use this power to give life the shape of justice for all. For each one of us has the capacity to speak the truth, to act from love, to make sound choices. Let our compassion be not a mere passive emotion, but an energizing force, a launching pad for action. Firm our courage and commitment, O Spirit of life. Move in our hearts, move in our hands and feet as we actively work for reproductive justice. So may it be. Amen. A time of silence. This morning's reading will be shared by Mary Kay Peters. Hear now, Say the Word by Eileen Casey Campbell, a Unitarian Universalist minister serving in upstate New York.
I never heard the word abortion in church when I was a child. So many Sundays, I listened to cis men who tried not to come within 10 feet of a uterus, who had themselves made a choice, a vow, to parent no children, preach from towering pulpit about protecting life, and they didn't say the word, but we all knew whose lives they meant to defend. I read in the weekly bulletin editorials demanding respect for the unborn, written by the Knights of Columbus. Yes, that same Columbus who wrenched nursing babies away from their mothers with his own hands. And we didn't say abortion, but we said his name. I heard about the valiant fight against the tyranny of someone named Roe or Wade. I never was sure who my enemy was supposed to be, but we passed the basket for special collections to battle them. Battle we did, from our pulpit and our pews and our publications. And downstairs in the church kitchen, I never heard anyone say abortion, but I did hear the mothers whisper to one another about which doctor to call. I heard the organist offer rides to a clinic far enough away not to be seen by prying eyes of God or whoever else. I saw aunties quietly slip round sleeves of pills into teenagers' shaky hands. And in the Sunday school hallway, they took up collections of their own sort to pay for a nameless procedure for Mary Teresa or Mary Angela or Mary Elizabeth or someone inevitably named for that single unmarried mother. No one said the word abortion in the hallowed halls or the dingy basement of my church, but everybody knew about them, needed them, got them. And even while we descend into the dim reality of having to slip each other cash in secret, traffic one another over borders, break laws and vows and bodies, I know as long as the people of this church let me stand in this space, I sure as hell will never stop saying it here.
The first letter to the editor I ever wrote as a teenager in the 80s was about abortion. The religious right had been campaigning against abortion for some time, which was evident in most letters on the subject printed in my local small-town newspaper. As a young person with a uterus, I was acutely tuned into the moral and practical questions raised by the abortion debate. I felt someone needed to present another, more nuanced view. I didn't yet know the hymn that we sang earlier, but it expresses well how I understood the issue, that all life is a gift, which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. Intentional choices about parenting seem to me an essential part of not only creating healthy families for children to grow up in, but making happy adult lives as well. Good for everyone. At that time, my views were not shaped by my religious community, but were worked out in private. In the mainline Protestant church my family attended, one of the more conservative members, a man who also worked for the newspaper, was vocal in his views about the evils of abortion. But I didn't hear any official teaching on the subject at church. It seemed that the religious leaders and traditions that spoke publicly about abortion wholly condemned the practice. I'm heartened now to be part of a spiritual tradition that has been speaking with clear moral grounding on this subject for over half a century. Unitarian Universalism has long affirmed gender equity as a core religious belief and comprehensive reproductive care as a moral good for society. Most recently, at our National General Assembly in June, delegates from UU congregations across the country, including several delegates from this church, adopted an action of immediate witness to support abortion access. The draft Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade had been leaked just the month before, and that very week of our national denominational gathering, the Supreme Court nullified the constitutional protection for abortion. Let me share some of the language with you from that statement, democratically adopted through our Unitarian Universalist Association. As people who have had abortions, as co-conspirators and allies for reproductive justice, and as thoughtful advocates for family well-being, UUs have a moral responsibility to demand and ensure that abortion protections are codified into law. Now is the time to revitalize our long-standing commitment to reproductive justice. It goes on, our Unitarian Universalist faith affirms that all of our bodies are sacred and that we are each endowed with the twin gifts of agency and conscience. Each of us should have the power to decide what does and doesn't happen to our bodies at every moment of our lives, because consent and self-determination are holy. In the words of Sister Song, the Women of Color Reproductive Justice Collective, we unequivocally support every person's right to maintain personal bodily autonomy, to have children, to not have children, and to parent children in safe and sustainable communities. Our National Assembly called UUs to take a number of actions in support of these principles. They called us to make a personal commitment to this work, to organize in our congregations with other faith activists and community organizations, to witness and protest rallies and public statements we make with grounding in our liberal theology, to advocate through media and outreach to lawmakers, to build networks of support for abortion seekers in our local areas, to educate, including continuing to provide the comprehensive sexuality education for all ages called Our Whole Lives, or OWL, that we teach within our churches, and to raise funds for abortion access and for reproductive justice groups led by women of color. We each have an opportunity to participate in that fundraising this very day, that last point. Judy Unger, our summer music director, has organized a benefit concert for Nebraska Abortion Resources near to be held in this very sanctuary at 3 p.m. today. She's lined up vibrant musicians and speakers from partnering organizations. So come back or come here if you're online, bring a friend if you can. And even if you can't come for the music and camaraderie, you can donate to NEAR whenever you hear about this. To position this church to more powerfully do many of the other things on that action list, like advocacy, witness, and network building, this congregation can make its own local statement of commitment to reproductive justice. Your Board of Trustees has set a special congregational meeting for September 25th to begin that process. If you are a voting member of the church, you can attend either in person or on Zoom immediately after worship on September 25th. So please mark your calendar and plan to participate. The vote taken then, if passed, will lead to a mailed ballot vote on a resolution of support for reproductive justice. Now, this may sound a bit involved, and it is. The congregation's policy on taking a stand lays out this process to ensure that your leaders do not speak or act on social issues in the name of the church unless the congregation has deliberately expressed a position and committed to engagement. You'll hear more about our local resolution on reproductive justice as we get closer to the special meeting and the vote by mail. Now, does it seem surprising to anyone here for a faith tradition to so vocally support reproductive justice, including abortion access? If so, consider that there has never been only one religious position on this issue. Abortion is acceptable in most hunter-gatherer societies. The practice was common in ancient Greece and Rome, often looked upon as cradles of Western civilization. In Jewish teaching, the fetus is not considered a person and has no rights. The Bible cherished by Christians, which enumerates all kinds of rules about all kinds of things, including menstruation and other matters relating to reproduction, says not a word about abortion. I found it interesting to learn that the Catholic Church did not take a position until 1312, 13 centuries after Jesus. It then adopted the view, which had been voiced by St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas, that because the fetus does not look human, abortion was not murder. In long-standing canon law, abortion was not deemed homicide until roughly the end of the first trimester, after the fetus was considered formed. 5 centuries later, in 1869, that's pretty recent, 1869, abortion at any time could be cause for excommunication of a Catholic. The reason for this change was not religious, so much as a misunderstanding of new information coming from science. For the first time, sperm cells were being looked at under a microscope, and some thought they saw in sperm tiny but fully formed human beings. And thus an old idea was revived, that every sperm contains a tiny formed human, a male human, whose tiny testes contain more humans, and on it goes. So I'm guessing many people would be surprised to learn that official Catholic opposition to abortion began on that basis only 150 years ago. And what about evangelical Protestants? At the time that the Supreme Court decision Roe v. Wade was established in 1973, most evangelical leaders were silent on the matter, while some signaled their support. Writing on the origins of the anti-choice movement, Glennon Doyle tells that the prevailing evangelical position at the time was that life began with the baby's first breath at birth. 6 years after Roe, evangelical leaders suddenly started caring about abortion. They called for a holy war to lead the nation back to the moral stance that made America great. They trained pastors who took the message to the pews. I'll quote from their crib sheet. It said, "To be aligned with Jesus, to have family values, to be moral, one must be against abortion and gay people, and vote for the candidate that is anti-abortion and anti-gay." This was new in 1979. When presidential candidate Ronald Reagan adopted these talking points and got elected with them, the religious right was born. So the Roman Catholic Church waited many centuries to take an official position against abortion, and it was only 40 years ago that evangelicals started the pro-life campaign. What's really going on here? Some people running private Christian schools saw trouble brewing. The Black civil rights movement that had made major legal strides in the previous decade was identified as a threat by a few white wealthy men. These elites wanted to keep operating their schools as racially segregated spaces while keeping their tax-exempt status. They determined that they needed to identify some issue that would mobilize their evangelical followers politically, but now they couldn't openly admit it was about racial segregation. They latched onto abortion as a way to get out the vote for conservatives. They used images of embryos to help keep Black people gay people and women in their old, separate, and unequal places. So on the surface, the pro-life movement presented a message of family values, but under the water, this iceberg was built on fear, greed, and the desire to maintain the long-standing power structure, just as it was being challenged on all sides. I don't know about you, but the irony to me of doing this all in the name of Jesus is sharp. Jesus, who championed the marginalized, the poor, women, children, and contradicted the message of Rome, of the Roman elite that might made right. Jesus, who instead proclaimed in his life and teachings that we are to love one another, love our neighbor as ourselves, without regard to any of those superficial differences that have long been used to elevate some over others. What would the real Jesus do? Rather than pitting some people against others, a form of social and spiritual poisoning, we should be working for the freedom and flourishing of all people. The prophet of our own culture, Dr. King, put it this way: none of us are free until all of us are free. Let's rest with that thought. So, an anti-abortion stance does not necessarily have a long-standing religious basis. Of course, there may be many individuals who sincerely hold religious beliefs that lead them to that position, and I respect that. But for the church as an institution, when looking at what happened historically in Catholicism and in the evangelical Christian tradition, an anti-abortion stance seems to have less to do with ethics and more to do with male elites co-opting the church to protect their own position of power. Regardless of how or why a faith tradition developed its position, no one religion's stance should hold the force of law. It doesn't matter how many people follow that faith and wish to impose it on others. We don't do that in America. This is separation of church and state 101. So what about the Constitution? This is the justification that Justice Samuel Alito recently gave in the decision which overturned Roe v. Wade, that abortion is not deeply rooted in our history and tradition, and therefore should not be a protected right. Like the religious rights argument against abortion, I find this constitutional argument both deceptive and undemocratic. Deceptive, because at the time the Constitution was written, abortion was legal until quickening, when a baby could be felt moving in the womb, typically around 5 months. Renana Dine reports that abortion was not just legal, it was a safe, condoned, and practiced procedure in colonial America, and common enough to appear in the legal and medical records of the period. Official abortion laws, she noted, did not appear on the books in the United States until 1821. And abortion before quickening did not become illegal until the 1860s. Now, it wasn't until 1910 that abortion at any stage was barred across the US, except to save the mother's life. Several different groups were part of the campaign that successfully criminalized the procedure. The Catholic Church was involved, but it wasn't just that bastion of patriarchy. Women throughout society were becoming more independent, engaged in activities outside the home, a threat to men's monopoly on power. In particular, white men were alarmed that upper-class white women were having fewer children and having them later. The birth rate for the white population was dropping. Some white people feared that the now emancipated African American population and new non-white immigrants would overrun the country. At the same time, a class of scientifically trained doctors, which was a new thing, saw an opportunity to corner the market on women's health care. Doctors claimed that only they had the knowledge to determine when a fetus was viable or when a woman's health was endangered. The American Medical Association took a strong position as male doctors, and only men were then admitted to medical schools, sought to squeeze out midwives and other practitioners who were largely women helping other women. So it was a potent mix of white men preserving their power over both black and brown people and women that led to the criminalization of abortion by the early 1900s. As we heard, by the 1970s, the evangelical movement was concerned about gay people too. And of course, today, as we have more widespread awareness of gender diversity, we see a similar reactionary pattern from much the same groups against transgender and non-binary people. Justice Alito's argument that abortion should not be a protected right because it is not deeply rooted in our history and tradition is ignorant at best and misleading in light of actual history. History which one would hope that a Supreme Court justice would know before invoking it. For most of U.S. history, including at its constitutional beginnings, abortion was legal and common. But there's another sense in which I believe Justice Alito is correct. The Constitution is not inherently democratic. It wasn't meant to establish a democracy of the kind that most Americans now believe our nation to be or aspire for it to be. The founders did intend to separate church and state, avoiding the religious strife that had riven Europe for centuries, and Justice Alito surely knew that. But he is correct that the Constitution did not aspire to broad social equality. Those meanings were read into our founding document later, starting with abolitionists against slavery. The Constitution didn't say anything about women or their reproductive health. Like slaves and indigenous people, women were non-persons in the law when it was established. A few months ago, Margaret Atwood made this observation in The Atlantic. That's where I read it. Atwood is the author of the dystopian novel The Handmaid's Tale, now an Emmy-winning TV series on Hulu. It's set in a future when an area anchored in New England, now called Gilead, has formed its own nation. A male elite has organized this society on a sort of fundamentalist vision of Puritanism. Atwood brings to life a culture extremely repressive to women. Her tale recognizes that the oppression of LGBT people would go hand in hand. However, race seems to be almost a neutral factor in her story. Perhaps Atwood, a white Canadian, did not understand how deeply entwined racism is in any power struggles in the United States. It is black women, not white women, like the main character in A Handmaid's Tale, who have long had the least control over their fertility, and black women whose access to reproductive care is still most restricted. Atwood says that she stopped writing her novel several times in the 1980s. She feared it was too much of a stretch for readers to imagine an extremist regime like her novel depicts, where women's fertility and lives are brutally controlled by elite men. But now, in 2022, Atwood warns, theocratic dictatorships do not lie only in the distant past. There are a number of them on the planet today. What, she asks, is to prevent the United States from becoming one of them? Not our current Supreme Court, it would seem to me. If the court is ready to unwind settled law on the basis that the original Constitution did not build in those guarantees, we could sooner or later find ourselves bidding adieu to other advances made over the past 250 years to perfect our union. Human rights and democratic participation, not only for women, but for people of color, for sexual and gender minorities, for people with disabilities, and for the non-ownership class, the poor, already largely abandoned. This is not just about reproductive rights. Those are important, but it is not just about how far someone with a dangerous or unwanted pregnancy will have to go, if they can travel at all, to exercise agency. It is not just about how many children will be born into poverty, with parents ill-equipped to raise them. This is a struggle for the soul of America. Right to lifers sometimes talk about ensoulment and when the soul enters the body. Well, our nation has a soul too, and it is in danger. The struggle over abortion is a moral struggle. It is a power struggle about who is included, who gets freedom, who has the best chances to survive and thrive, and who doesn't. This latest legal whiplash with abortion is part of the ongoing power struggles that animate our country, with intersections across gender, race, class, ability, sexual orientation, and gender identity. We can start taking action this very day to bring about a deeper justice. You can support Nebraska Abortion Resources at the concert this afternoon or with your donation at any time. And members of this church, you can attend the brief congregational meeting online or in person on September 25th. When you get your ballot by mail, you could vote on our local congregation's resolution for reproductive justice. Will you do that? Are you with me? Are you with me? Since our nation was founded, its people have worked to create a more perfect union. Generations before us have been faithful to this struggle. We will not finish the work, but we must do our part. We must continue to protect and perfect this nation for all who are in it today and for future generations. We must help to create a deeper justice for all. Can I get an amen? Amen. Amen. And may it be so. Our closing hymn is number 1028 in the teal hymnal, The Fire of Commitment. Those who are masked or attending from home may sing along. Whether you sing or listen, you can stand for this upbeat song or groove along in your pew or your chair. And thanks to Jonathan Frazier for joining in on the drums. The Fire of Commitment.
Sets our mind and soul
the fire of commitment burn bright in this community and in each one of us as we face the challenges to reproductive justice. May we work faithfully to create a deeper justice for all people. So may it be. Amen.